Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Dan Casper here with you as always. On this episode of the podcast, well, with the Brewers losing in heartbreaking fashion, Brandon and I are going to do our top five plus sports heartbreaks. That's coming up in the third part of this podcast. Second part, Brandon will be joining me to talk some Brewers. He was at the game, at Game 3, so he'll be joining me for that. Really quick, I want to lead off this episode of the podcast, though, chatting a little football with the Packers getting set to take on the Rams this Sunday. Jordan Love, for the first time since before the Eagles game, a full participant at practice. Jair Alexander also returned to practice yesterday, so we will see if he actually gives it a go this weekend when we know Cooper Kupp and Puka is going to be playing. So could they elect to sit him down for another week, or will he get out there? I know they will say they don't do this, but when you look at coming up after this, you've got Arizona and Houston. Arizona, you got Marvin Harrison Jr. over there. Houston, you got Diggs, you got Nico Collins and such. Could they maybe want to elect to sit down Jair for another week to make sure he's ready to go for those? We'll see. But leading into this game, kind of a little scouting report, if you will, on both of these ball clubs. First, before that, we had the coordinators talking to the media yesterday, too. And I think one of the big ones out here, we're still kind of new with him, obviously with him being in his first year and such. But Jeff Hafley, Packers defensive coordinator, answering questions from the media and such. And two players that we have talked quite a bit about, especially this week and the last couple of weeks, kind of questioned where their play's been. It's been Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark. Jeff Hafley said on Kenny Clark, I think Kenny has done a good job. I think he's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. And as this thing shakes out, everybody's going to continue to see that. With Rashawn Gary, he said, we need to get more out of him, and he needs to get more out of me. So, a couple comments on those two players, and that's definitely something that I think a lot of us want to see an improvement from in this second quarter of the regular season, which kicks off this weekend. We want to see a better performance, an upgrade in performance from Kenny Clark and Rashawn Gary. When we look at some of the numbers here in terms of where these teams rank, Green Bay, the third-ranked offense in the NFL in terms of yards per game. The only two teams higher than them right now is Baltimore and San Francisco. Green Bay averaging about 410 yards per game offensively. The Rams are outside the top half of the league. They're about 312 and a half yards per game. Again, you're missing a couple of big-time weapons in Cooper and Puka. That's going to affect your numbers there. But in terms of passing yards, Green Bay and the Rams are back-to-back. Green Bay is averaging 235 yards through the air. In fact, there's no team right now, by the way, no team in the NFL that's averaging over 300 yards passing. If you'd have said the Seattle Seahawks with Geno Smith are averaging the most, have the highest amount of passing yards per game, go buy a lottery ticket, because that's the number one team in terms of passing yards per game right now, 280.8. Then you got San Francisco after that, Atlanta. But Green Bay and the Rams, top 10 teams in terms of passing. Now, rushing yards per game, Green Bay is number 2 in the league, behind Baltimore. The Rams are a bottom 5 team in terms of rushing yards per game. Rams averaging 88.3, Green Bay 174.5. In terms of points per game, Green Bay is a top 10 team in points per game. When you look at the Rams, bottom third. Rams are averaging about 18.8 points per game. Green Bay, 26. Now, defensively, when we look at this, defensively, Green Bay is about middle of the pack in terms of a little outside halfway in terms of yards allowed per game. They're allowing 339.8 yards per game. But the Rams are the second worst team in the league in terms of giving up yards per game. 385.3 yards per game. So they're giving up quite a bit. In terms of passing, if we want to break it down here a little bit more, the Rams are giving up 219.8 yards through the air, which Green Bay is actually allowing more. Green Bay is allowing 230.5 yards through the air. But the Rams are dead last in the NFL in stopping the run. 165.5 yards allowed on the ground. The team that is closest to them, the second worst team, is a team that Green Bay ran all over on, the Colts. So the Colts are giving up 164.8 yards per game on the ground. The Rams, 165.5. So if we do that, you look at where those numbers are, you'd be like, ooh, Josh Jacobs' game today or on Sunday. That's what things should tell us, right? If the Rams are really struggling at stopping the run, should be a Josh Jacobs game. Feed the rock to Josh Jacobs. That's what that would tell me. And when you kind of look at the Rams games, and their 4 games, a loss against the Lions, a loss against the Cardinals, a win against the Niners, and a loss against the Bears. Last week, if we go back to that first game of the season, the Lions game, David Montgomery had 91 yards on the ground on 17 carries. Jahmyr Gibbs contributed 11 carries for 40. If we go to the Cardinals game, James Conner had 21 carries for $122, 5.8 average. If we go to the Niners game, the lone win for the Rams, Jordan Mason, 19 carries, 77 yards. Brock Purdy actually had 10 carries for 41 yards. Go back to that Cardinals game, Kyler Murray had 5 carries for 59 yards. And then last week with the Bears, DeAndre Swift, 16 carries, 93 yards. So when you look at the top running backs, opponents-wise, going up against the Rams, Montgomery averaged 5.4. James Conner, 5.8. Jordan Mason, 4.1. DeAndre Swift, 5.8. I mean, that screams, let's focus on running the football. Let's get Josh Jacobs, a guy that I think if you asked, Packers fans a lot from last week against Minnesota and such, you probably want to see more Josh Jacobs. Well, I would imagine if everything goes right, as long as Green Bay doesn't fall in a deep hole in this game where they got to throw themselves back into it, this should be a Josh Jacobs type of game. I would have to imagine this is going to be a Josh Jacobs type of game. And hopefully that leads to opening it up down the field. That's who my key player in this game is going to be, is Josh Jacobs on the offensive side. Give him the rock. Get him 20-plus carries in this game. Because I think this is a game where he could eclipse the 100 yards and have himself a day. Control the clock. Control time of possession. You got a desperate Rams team who they don't want to drop to 1-4 on this season. Yeah, they're banged up and they can use injuries as an excuse and whatnot. But you're going up against a desperate Rams team. The last thing you want is to give them any bit of hope at home, any bit of confidence. It's the last thing you want to do here. Control the clock. Have success running the football. Give the rock to Josh Jacobs. Let that open up some of the routes, some of the lanes, some of the passing lanes for Jordan Love and these receivers. To me, there's everything points that this should be a Green Bay win. I mean, all over the board. This should be a Green Bay win. The only thing two things that may stop Green Bay from winning this is if the Rams, again, that whole desperation factor into it, and then if the Packers just kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Everything, this should be a Packers win. It is a banged-up Rams team. Yes, you're going on the road, and yes, you're facing them, in their house. But they're missing their top two offensive playmakers. They're struggling at stopping the run right now. This feeds into Green Bay. Green Bay coming off of a loss, too, against Minnesota. You can't lose another conference game. I know we're only entering just week 5 here, but of their 2 losses, too, it's Philadelphia and Minnesota. Those are NFC conference losses. Get down to tiebreakers and such. You can't add another conference loss to this. So maybe Green Bay's a little desperate too, if you want to throw that out there. And you look at Stafford's numbers. Yes, he's 978 passing yards, top 10. That's 8th in the league. But he's just got 2 touchdown passes. Now, for his credit too, he's only got 2 picks this year. And he is completing 68.5% of his throws. But I want to see this defense with no Puka, with no Cooper. I want to see them get aggressive with Stafford. Yes, that is a very good quarterback back there. And he can beat you. No doubt about it. Incredibly talented. But I kind of want to see the defense be a little aggressive with Stafford here. I don't want Green Bay just to sit back and let Stafford 5 yards, 6 yards, accumulate yards through the air and have these long drives of 6-7 yards and such and kind of keeping the Packers offense on the field. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. I want to see Green Bay go and get it. Go and get it. Go get him. Unleash the noise. So, but everything points to a Green Bay win. And to me, again, the only way the Packers don't win this game is somehow, if the Rams use that desperation as motivation and it kind of unlocks an extra gear into them, or the Packers just kind of do it to themselves. Offensively, Green Bay's more complete. They can run the football with Josh Jacobs. They're going up against the worst run defense in the league. Rams are missing their top 2 wide receivers, 2 of the best playmakers in the league easily on their team. Everything points to a Green Bay win, and it should. And they should win this game. And it'll be incredibly disappointing if Green Bay doesn't win this game on Sunday and drops to 2-3. It'll be very disappointing. And I'll just say now, unacceptable. Quick break, and I'm going to bring Brandon in, and we're going to talk some Brewers. You may think it's impossible to save some money with your grocery bill and at the gas pump all at the same time. But with Hy-Vee and Eau Claire, it's not. Take advantage of the great deals and the savings at Hy-Vee and Eau Claire while also earning money at the gas pump with Hy-Vee Perks. And don't forget, Hy-Vee and Eau Claire is your tailgating headquarters. Whether you're looking for food, beverages, or apparel to represent your favorite team, including your high school, Hy-Vee and Eau Claire has you covered. Tail great this season with Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Brandon Berg, our good buddy, our good friends, a couple hours of sleep coming back from Milwaukee, the good lands down there. I guess I don't really know how to kind of, segue into this thing. You texted me shortly after, which surprised me a little bit. So I thought, maybe I wasn't going to bother you. I wasn't going to text you or anything like that. Still feeling the same way as you did last night, a little bit?
Yeah, that sucked.
Kicking the gonads?
It was going really well until it wasn't.
Yeah. So, first of all, just kind of not to kind of open up or a wound or make it bigger. What was the energy like heading into that 9th, up 2-0, and what was it like as soon as Pete Alonso hit that home run in the stadium?
I mean, there was no shortage of energy. I mean, I can't say I've been there for a bunch of playoff type atmosphere games, but that is as loud as I've heard it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was going, that's for sure. And yeah, I mean the Alonso thing, like, obviously it kind of built up to that point because there were, there's a few runners on and just kind of the way the inning had went. So you could kind of feel like, like you could feel the angst kind of rising, and then suddenly it's just like I know this isn't true, but I swear from where I was sitting, you could hear, like, the Mets players celebrating after the 3-run homer, and which is kind of maybe an odd thing to say, but when you figure it, you're in a stadium with 42,000 people. Like, you wouldn't expect to be able to hear that from, you
were in left field.
Pretty far up the left field line, so it's not like I was close, but that's just how it felt. Because there was, there were the Mets fans that were there. They were celebrating, but then there was just a lot of quiet.
It's I don't know how else to describe, because obviously you were there, so there was the emotion had to be worse than probably a lot of us, watching it on the telecast. And the thing that sucks, one, they're not moving on, but what a dominant night from Tobias Myers for a rookie making his first start. And then, I'm sure everybody was thinking, well, let's see if the move's going to work for Murphy, not allowing him to see that third. And you look at the numbers, everybody was tweeting them. You look at Tobias Myers the third time through a lineup, they're not great. So, but the way he was dealing, I'm sure there was a lot of apprehension. Trevor McGill comes in, lights out. Nick Mears comes in, lights out. Freddie Peralta comes in relief, lights out. The dominant pitching of all people, too, that you would probably feel the most confident in is Devin Williams, and it's complete different. The first walk issued all game came in the ninth from the Brewers. And I know, there's no tomorrow, there's no other game, but the fact that pitching was so dominant at the beginning, too, that's going to be forgotten at this point.
It is, and there's some irony in there that there's a few decisions that happened in the first 8 innings that, you could have, at the time, questioned Pat Murphy about, taking Tobias Myers out after 5 innings. Pitching Nick Mears in the 7th. Nick Mears did not have great numbers this year.
I was nervous when he was out there.
Pinch hitting Jake Bauers for Rhys Hoskins. Like, those are all decisions that at some level it would have been fair to question, and they all worked. Like, the irony is the one decision that ended up not working was the one nobody questioned, and that was going to Devin Williams in the 9th because he's your closer. Like, it's set up. You have to imagine, outside of winning like 15-0, the exact same way, or the exact way the Brewers wanted it to. They gave the ball to Devin Williams in the 9th inning with a 2-run lead.
With the top of the order coming
the top of the order. Then the day before, we moved through the top of the order.
Yeah.
And Devin Williams had an abbreviated but a really, really good year, but there were a couple blow-up appearances in there. I think of an appearance in St. Louis where it was kind of similar to this, where you could just tell right away, like, he's not on. Like, it's just...
And I know there's the keyboard warriors or the Twitter, Facebook, social media people out there saying they should have pulled him after, when right before Alonso was out there. And that's hindsight 2020, right?
A little bit, but also, when you have someone like that, you give your best players wiggle room. You don't manage everybody the exact same. And at some point someone's earned the right to get out of their own jams, or at least try to. And that's what Pat Murphy gave Devin Williams. It just didn't work. Like, even at the time during the at bats, just the thing that was kind of worrying me was it just seemed like as much as the changeup for Devin Williams is such a weapon, like, it just, he kept going doing it, it just wasn't working, and it was just like, well, this is what I know. I gotta keep I gotta keep spamming the changeup, and Pete Alonso was looking for it. And he got one that was up enough, and he's a big strong dude. He hit it out.
Yeah, regardless if he was slumping at that point or
right.
Not,
No,
it's where when you look back at this series too, one thing that's going to stand out to me is the young guys stepping up. But where were the veterans?
Yes, exactly. That's the point. Like, when Rhys Hoskins was brought in, one of the reasons why was the idea of, like, oh, well, if the Brewers make the playoffs, like, that's the guy that's been there before with the Phillies. Like, he's he's had some big hits. He can do it. He didn't really do it. I think Adames and Contreras each had one hit. And, Adames led to Mitchell's home run, so I guess it was kind of a key hit, and Contreras had, I think, an RBI single in the first inning of the opener. But besides that, like, I was joking with a friend of mine, but it was kind of true. Like, during the game last night, it was almost like once you got past those two in the order, you almost felt a little bit more like, okay, hey, maybe now they can do something.
Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy to think that actually happened with Jake Bowers and Sal Frelick. Yeah. Like, it just, it was a bad time. It was a bad time to, be in a slump.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that happens.
Mm-hmm. Kind of goes back to, like, the second game, too, where in that eighth, and, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is our top three. This is the only way we're going to get something done if we're going to get something done. Cheerio ties it up, and then Garrett Mitchell hits the 2-run shots over there, too. I mean, on one side, it's, positive to see these young guys kind of step up in that spotlight over there. But in the same breath, incredibly disappointing to see the veterans.
Right. And, you look at the guys that stepped up on the other end for the Mets. Francisco Lindor starting it out. He had a couple hits through the walk that starting ninth. Pete Alonso, who you said was ice cold, but, is an he's a star in this league.
Mm-hmm.
He's a free agent, going to be a free agent whenever the Mets season is done. And he's going to get a lot of money to go play first base somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's... I think above all else, I'm just tired of being on this end of it.
Yeah.
It's just exhausting that it ended the same way it's ended since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like you can give all the credit in the world for Mets. They rallied. I mean, they had every reason to kind of turtle up there at the end with the way that those last few innings did, but they didn't. But, how many times has some sort of thing like this played out for the Brewers in the postseason before? 2019, obviously, it was the eighth inning for Josh Hader against the Nationals. 2021, they couldn't score against the Braves.
Mm-hmm.
2023, they kept tripping over themselves against the Diamondbacks. And for the first game and a half of this series, that's how it was this year. They, obviously, game one, we know, was an absolute mess. Game two had its bad moments, too, before the team and the young guys kind of pulled the nose up a little bit. But it's just frustrating that this way was a little bit different than previously, but the same thing just keeps happening over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been different players that have been in the middle of it, so it's not like, it's this player that's blowing it year after year. It's just different people,
because that makes it more difficult because you can't fix it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, well, what do you do? It's like, I don't know. It's just it's just something that right now is just kind of ingrained in this team, I guess. And what do you do?
You got a different manager. You've got different.
Right.
I mean,
I'd seen the stat before the game yesterday, or maybe it was after the game Wednesday, that Wednesday night the win was the first time since probably Game 6 of the 2018 NLCS that the Brewers scored more than 4 runs in a playoff game. Look, obviously the Devin Williams thing, gigantic, huge. You got to score more than 2 runs. This just seems like it's always such a recurring theme for the Brewers in the playoffs. You have to score more runs. Other teams do it. I get that in the postseason, offense is a little bit more under the microscope.
Mm-hmm.
But it's they had traffic on the bases seemingly every inning.
Yeah, they had a leadoff hitter how many times?
Yeah, it was like, there's a runner on third with 2 outs. Well, here's he's a weak grounder. Jose Quintana, man.
It was a flashback to his Cubs days.
I want the Brewers to throw a bunch of money at Jose Quintana this offseason just so they don't have to hit against him. Come on in and be the 4th starter. Fantastic. I will welcome you with open arms, Serge. So you don't have to pitch against the Brewers.
I mean, it was set up I'm like, oh, crap, game 3, of course it's Quintana.
Yeah, it was just...
it's like full circle moment there.
It is. And he went out and he threw. He kept him off balance. He doesn't throw hard anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? He kept the Brewers off balance. They didn't hit very many balls deep in the outfield.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, though, too. I know, we were talking a little bit about it back and forth, and you're right. It's it's happening every year, which, first of all, if we would have said this back in 2008,
well, sure.
But again, we've kind of said it a few times, expectations start to change.
Right.
It's, okay, we've been there a lot now. Now we want a little bit more. It's not being greedy. It's just...
Your expectations change because the team has put itself in a spot that allows you to change those expectations.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, whether it's a fan or whether it's the franchise, because I guarantee you the franchise is like, okay, we're sick of this too.
Right.
But it comes down to, what are you going to do differently too? Is it spend more money to get more hitters or I don't know, but there's nothing wrong. I don't think it's being spoiled or acting spoiled or
Absolutely
anything
not.
like that. It's like, we want a little bit more just because, great, yes, thankful we've been put in that position to compete for it, but we want a little bit more now. And that's just because we want to win
You
a
almost
championship.
you feel like the success you've had in the regular season, I won't say earns you the right to ask for more, but it sets the expectation that I think it's okay to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Because what's the end game of it all? We want a championship, right? We want a World Series championship. You and I weren't around, but let's face it. I want something different besides talking about 1982 all the time.
Right.
And that wasn't even a World Series win.
Correct.
And that's not a diss on that team of Robin Young. It's just I don't want to keep going back to that. We make fun as Packers fans for 85 Bears. At least they won that one.
Right.
You know?
And on the way back for a little while when I was still near Milwaukee, I was listening to the flagship, TMJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'll listen. And that was something that one of the callers brought up. He's like, he's like, hey, because Jerry Augustine's one of the guys in the postgame show, and he was with part of that team. So he's like, hey, I'm super grateful for that team. He goes, but I want another team we can talk about in that light. Like, I want somebody else, so it doesn't always have to always go back to 1982.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with you. And it's different because, I don't know if it is different, but it's a little bit, again, you and I weren't alive when that team was out there. So, and that's, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting that.
No.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So, going back to preseason, you and I had our preseason expectations, predictions, and such. You predicted Brewers going to the postseason. I didn't. But going back to the preseason prediction that you had, and now how it all ended up, is it still a successful season in your mind? Is it a disappointment? Is it a little bit both? Like for me, first of all, it's a success because I didn't have them going to the postseason. But again, going back to expectations change, in my opinion, and goals change as the season transpires. Now you're talking about first place. It's like, okay, now you're competing for top two. It changed now to it's like, okay, I know this team's going to be a playoff team now. Now I want them to go deep in the postseason and not just make an appearance.
If you're in it, you have a shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, I think when you kind of said, like, yes and no. Like, it is because, again, this beat our expectations. And there's reasons to be very optimistic when you look at the young guys. Mm-hmm. Like, there's reasons to be optimistic because there's no more young guys that are going to make an impact next year.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like there's only so many chances you get.
Yeah.
And to have another one slip through your fingers like that is just frustrating. Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be years where that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. To me, it's like I look at, okay, like Jackson Chourio surpassed all my expectations. Pat Murphy surpassed, I'm going through a list of stuff that's like the positives. Robert Gasser for the very little amount of time we had. Tobias Myers,
there were no expectations. Nobody, even me, knew who he was in spring training.
Exactly. And now you're looking at him as
that's
part of the rotation.
That's a guy. That's a guy you can lean on. You look at him, obviously Freddie Peralta will be back. Like, you've got, there, you've got some people there that you're looking at as cornerstones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that's why I hate to always ask. I don't like to use the word failure when you assess a season. To me, I think there's a lot of, I don't know if I want to use the word successful. It was a disappointing end, but it surpassed my personal expectations for it. And everybody's going to be different at that point, right? And then when you factor in, they lost Wade Miley to an injury. One of their veteran starters.
Brandon Woodruff never played, and that was kind of the expectation.
Christian Yelich was having a fantastic All-Star year, and then he missed the second half.
Robert Gasser missed most of the year. Like, with what he did in his first few starts, you thought, like, okay, wow, here's
17 different starting pitchers.
Yeah, here's somebody like.
Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a lot of positives. It's just the end game is what we focus on and what the ultimate goal is, and that was disappointing.
Right. It's when it ends that way, it's always going to leave a sour taste in your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not going to be able to fully look at the year and say, oh, no, it was awesome, it was great. Like, even though there's a lot of really good things that happened because of how it ended.
Mm-hmm.
And how it ended very similar the way it's ended the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. There is nobody that I would not want to be right now in this world. Well, there's a few. But I can't imagine what's going through Devin Williams' mind. In that position, when you factor in everything, the pitching was so off. You're handed a 2-run lead. Not a big lead, but it's a 2-run lead.
You had some wiggle room in there.
Yep. You're at home. It's a win or go home situation. And how it all transpired. I can't imagine that feeling.
Well, and you mentioned it on the show yesterday about Garrett Mitchell hitting the going home run. Like, that's what kids dream of. Like, to go from the highest of highs, I guarantee you there aren't very many kids in the backyards dreaming of giving up a lead in the playoffs.
Right.
Like, you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in 24 hours.
Right.
That's what it's about this time of year.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Sal Frelick, for crying out loud, hitting his longest home run and his hardest hit ball, who was probably the most excited person in that ballpark.
Right. His first home run since May.
Yeah.
Like, my goodness, before that inning, if you had some sort of prop bet and you could have bet back-to-back homers for Jake Bauers and Sal Frelick, you probably won a lot of money.
Yeah. Go buy a lottery ticket and try your luck over there, too.
Right.
Because, I mean, I was hooting and hollering in the house because I wasn't expecting that, for crying out loud.
No. Like,
especially Frelick, no offense, but especially Frelick.
But then that one was, that was farther than Bauers. Like, from where we were sitting, I'm like the big thing was, like, because you can't entirely tell the right field line, so it's like, if that's fair, it's gone. Mm-hmm. And obviously it was.
You have to kind of use
it was fair by a bit. Like, you just have to stare at the foul pole and you see, okay, well, I saw the ball, so it's fair.
Yep. Or kind of see the crowd reaction to how it's like a field goal almost when you're at a certain length.
Yes.
Trying to see that. But, yeah, it's just, I can't imagine that type of feeling for a guy like Devin. And, first, it's his job. I mean, he failed at his job. He's got to do his job, and he didn't do it.
No.
He didn't do it.
He didn't have it.
Right.
You could tell pretty much right away, like, okay, this is not him from Wednesday night when he just mowed through people.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was kind of telling, though, afterwards. And I know, and this is where I give credit to coaches and athletes when you suffer a loss like that, and then you got to sit in front of cameras and answer questions and all that. And
people ask you, hey, why'd you suck tonight?
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I thought it was kind of telling, considering we've had how many months and days of Pat Murphy conferences, when he dropped the word, it's like a tragedy. In his post-game presser yesterday, I was like, you could tell that's hit hard in that clubhouse.
Right.
And you heard guys like, I think it was Willie Adames or Freddie or whoever say this is the closest team that they've ever played on. And think about some of those teams these last few years when we've talked about the Brewers clubhouse and the connection. For those guys, for like a Willie Adames to say this is the closest team I've ever played on, that tells you something.
It does.
That tells you a lot. And Pat Murphy saying we can't duplicate 2024. And for people wonder, he's talking about the connection and the chemistry within that clubhouse. I know there were some smart aleck responses on Twitter like, well, we don't want to duplicate. It's not what he's talking about, with wins and loss perspective.
Right.
So, but yeah, when you hear kind of like a Pat Murphy, who we've seen him get emotional and kind of, but to drop the word tragedy, it was like, ooh, that had to hit hard. It sucks, and it's a kick in the gonads. It's a straight up kick in the gonads.
There's no other way to describe it.
Yeah,
it's a kick down south.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm partially responsible because I jinxed it waking my kid up to watch the final 2 outs. I was trying to be.
And I will bring this up. Shout out to the very nice Venezuelan woman that was sitting next to me and my friends at the game because she had an even worse night than us. Well, she did get Jackson Churio's attention at one point, so she was pretty excited about that.
Ooh, okay.
But she lost to 50-50 by one number.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think it was like 37 or 41. I forget. It was.
Wow.
Yeah, we were talking to her about that. That was she was taking it a lot better than I would. I might have just left at that point. I'm gonna be honest.
One number.
Yeah, she was showing it to our friend, and we're looking, and we're like, oh, it was rough.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and top 5 plus sports heartbreaks coming up next. We're getting set for another busy travel season, vacations, taking our kids to all their games and activities, and you need a proper vehicle to get you to where you're going and safely. That's where Toyson Ford can help you. Toyson Ford will go the extra mile to provide you with compelling options for new and used car shopping. They will gladly work with you on financing no matter what your budget may be. They're committed to giving drivers across the Chippewa Valley the best in customer service. Check them out for yourself. Visit Toyson Ford in Chippewa Falls today and check out their website, toysonford.net. You sure you want to do this now?
Yeah.
All right.
I texted you this while I was waiting in line after the game, so it was an idea.
Waiting in line to get out, or
I was waiting in line. We took the one of the buses in,
That makes sense.
Because we weren't tailgating, and because we had people traveling from all over, so it's like, look, we're not going to tailgate. We'll just meet somewhere, and then went. And we did, and it worked out very well. Kudos to there's a guy on our bus on the way back where apparently the one we were on was this lady said it was the karaoke bus. So basically, hey, she was looking for people that wanted to sing along, which I appreciate her effort. Like, she was very nice and everything. It just wasn't the time.
Yeah.
But I did appreciate that there was one guy who the song he suggested was "Loser" by Beck.
Ah, yeah.
I'm like, I don't feel that. But no. Again, she's very nice. I appreciated the effort, but it just wasn't the time. Even a regular season game, I would have been, hey, but that time it's just like, no, not tonight, ma'am.
Not tonight. All right, should we do number one since we both have the same?
Let's do it. Let's start. Okay. We'll start with number one because
we both got it. So this is our top 5 plus heartbreaks, sports heartbreaks as fans, not as players or anything like that. But do you want to say yours and we'll just see? Is it Badgers?
It's 2015 Badgers basketball national title game lost to Duke.
Yep, that's mine too.
Yep.
First time, I remember coming in the next morning, didn't want to talk. I was just, that one hit hard, and I don't know if it was the same reason for you, but I had the mindset of, it ain't happening again.
Right. And?
It's not going to happen again.
And they haven't been close. So.
And that team, even the year prior, that team was just so fun.
Yes.
Frank the Tank. Yeah, good. Frank the Tank.
Decker.
Nigel Hayes. Gosser. Bronson.
Yeah, as a younger guy.
Yep. You had good stories, or the stenographer stuff at the tournaments, Bo Ryan. It was just such a fun team, and it was a good team. And to be there with Duke, and they almost did, it was just...
And they were up. It's just the most Wisconsin sports thing about it. They had a double-digit lead in the second half, right?
Yeah.
And it just goes away. And, Justice can tell it a lot better because he was there for it. It's some... You might have to ask him about that on Monday, just hey...
I don't want to revisit it again.
But because him and Chance were there for TV 13 covering it, and he's...
And I got asked to go, and I couldn't. And part of me is am I glad? Or am I still...
Would you have wanted to see them in that, in that event, in that spot?
Right.
Knowing there's a decent chance it may not happen again, at least not in our lifetimes.
Yeah, but that is my number one for sure.
Samesies.
So, all right. So should we just go straight down number 2?
Let's do that.
Okay. So number 2 for you, Brandon.
Number 2 for me is 2011 Milwaukee Brewers.
Okay. Yep.
Because I'll explain this here, but a bit like the Badgers that you just mentioned, at the time that felt like that was it. That felt like that was the shot. They made it in 2008, but let's be real, everyone was just happy to be there.
Yep.
2011.
That was last year Prince.
Right. It was last year Prince Fielder. They had geared up for that. They had made the trades for Greinke and Markham.
Yep.
Mid-season trade for Francisco Rodriguez.
Yep.
So it just felt like, okay, if it's going to happen, now's the time. And remember, the only other real thing that any of us had was that 2008 year. Otherwise, this was still very much foreign territory for us.
Yeah.
And then, the way the series goes, they win game 1 against the Cardinals. They get it back to Milwaukee. And I got scared on Wednesday when they had the stat about, I think it was Churio had the first leadoff home run for the Brewers in the playoffs since Corey Hart in Game 6 of 2011. I'm just like, oh no. Don't show me that. But yeah, so that was why that one will always, and maybe it hurts a skosh less.
You were at Game 6 too.
I was not. I was not.
Okay.
No. I was watching with.
Think of somebody else. Yeah.
No, yep. I have a friend that was.
Yeah, I have a friend too.
No, that one. Yeah, that one.
That was another game I turned down to go to because it
was a Sunday night.
Yep. Because I believe that was the weekend too that I went to the Packers-Rams game. And I was just like, I don't want to go. I had to get home, and that's just long traveling and that too. So
yeah.
But I was at that Game 5 for 2011 against the Diamondbacks. Still, if we were to do top 5 memories, that'd be top 5 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for that walk-off there. But, yeah, that's I still have the Sports Illustrated with Brawny Fielder and Tony P. Niger Morgan on the cover. I can picture it to this day. Yeah, that's a good one, too. My My second one, so it's a little bit more of a personal one here too, but I am going with the 07-08 NFC Championship, Packers-Giants, because I was there.
And it's cold.
And it was cold. But to backtrack it a little bit, I mean, that season was just, again, you talk about a season going over expectations.
Right.
Early in the year, I remember this. So this was my junior year in college, fourth year in college. But it was like that summer, me and my buddies, my roommates were like, hey, let's go to the Packer Vikings. When you could just buy Packer Vikings without the preseason, it was like $20 a piece. And it was at the Metrodome. So we're like, yeah, we'll go. It's early on. Way before we knew about the Favre record, and it ended up, I remember that week before watching the Chargers game, don't do it, we want to see it, So we saw that. So, you had that built in, that memory. But then we went and tailgated for the Snow Globe game, the playoff game against the Seahawks. Didn't have tickets, turned down tickets, actually. But we tailgated through that. And then I remember the next day watching that Cowboys-Giants game, and I'm like, Cowboys lose this, I'm going. I'm going. And the Cowboys lose it. Tickets were like, I think I had way up top for $500. I had to use financial aid money to go. But I'm like, I'm going because I'm like, oh, I want to see them celebrate going to the Super Bowl because we're beating the Giants. And then it was like this cold, sort of thing. And then just how it toyed with my heart, all the missed field goals from Tynes. And I was sitting next to a couple guys from New York. And I'll still remember, the muffed, if Tramon Williams would have just jumped on that muffed punt by the Giants, we would have Brett Favre throwing an interception. But when Tynes lined up for that last field goal, those New York fans called every miss. They're like, dude, don't worry, he's going to miss. And he missed. The second one, he's like, dude, he's going to miss this one too. But the third one, and you're like, yeah, sorry, man, he ain't missing this one. And they called it. So it was the quietest I've ever heard Lambeau out there. So just from a personal standpoint.
Understandable.
Like somebody said they couldn't watch highlights. I had that mindset. I did not watch ESPN for the week after because I didn't want to watch anything with Giants. I went in that thing. I'm like, I'm not watching the Super Bowl between the Giants and Patriots. I did.
Yeah.
But I had no, I don't want to.
Yeah.
So that's my second one.
Yep. Yep. I got you. Well, this leads in well to my number 3. 2009, I guess it would be technically the 2010 NFC title game. Vikings lose to the Saints. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I watched it at my dad's. I drove back from college and watched my dad's a Vikings fan. My dad's the reason I'm a Vikings fan. Mm-hmm. When I drove back to his house, we watched it. Obviously, that game went the way it did. Mm-hmm. And I remember, after the game, I just sat there and I watched all of the post-game stuff. And I'm just like, I just need to, take this in. Mm-hmm. It sucks, but just watch it. Watch it all, And then you mentioned the whole Super Bowl thing. 2 weeks later, obviously, then the Saints go on to beat the Colts in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
We go to we actually went and watched that Super Bowl at a local watering hole in Oshkosh with a couple friends of mine. And when you walk in, they said, "Hey, who are you cheering for?" Basically, you got a wristband based on what team you were cheering for. And every time that team scored, you got a free drink. Mm-hmm. I was cheering for the Colts because I like the Colts. I wanted them to win, but also I was bitter.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
still am. But and first half, it's going all right. Second half, obviously the Saints take control. It gets away, and I may have been a little overserved. But long story short, next morning I go to my class. I had a journalism class 10:20. And I don't look great. I'm not sick. I don't look great. Mm-hmm. Probably kind of how I look right now. And I sat down it was a computer lab. Sat down at the desk at a computer lab, and boss. But teacher comes up to me and goes, "Oh, hey, Brandon, how's it going?" I'm just like, not great. He just kind of looks at me and goes, "That's right, you're a Vikings fan, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yep." He just puts his hand on my shoulder and goes, "Class will be done in about 20 minutes." Class was done in about 20 minutes.
That's awesome. So my number 3 is actually, I will go with the NFC Championship game of 14-15. Now, that one annoyed me. Yes, it upset me. It was a huge heartbreak. Maybe not to the level of a lot of people did, because it's a number 1 for a lot of people. I think what annoyed me the most, that I remember most about that, is before the game was over, all the constant postings on Facebook saying, we're going to the Super Bowl, we're going to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, please don't jinx it. we've been down this road before, kind of sort of, and what happened, and to the gutless people who deleted all those posts, own up to it.
Right.
Because I tried going back to them at that because I was going to yell at them, and they deleted them. But yeah, I mean, I remember sitting there just clenching my jaws watching it all go down. And I could just feel like my neck popping out. Like I was just like, I didn't say anything. I wasn't hooting and hollering. It was just silence. Because I was watching the game by myself, actually.
Right, and I remember, and I will say this too, I was watching that, and I was actually already with a few minutes left, I was actually already trying to plan out, like, the pages for the next day of the Herald. Like, okay, the Packers are going to the Super Bowl. What am I going to do here, this different stuff. And then I had to redo it all.
Yeah. So that, it was kind of very similar to maybe last night's game. You're up with just a few minutes.
But it's obviously that's to go to the Super Bowl versus, but still, yes.
That's
a game where you just, for so long, you feel like they got it, and then something happens, you go, oh, no.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's number 3 for me.
Yep.
Your number 4.
My number 4 is going to be the Wisconsin Badgers football team losing in the 2017 Big Ten title game. Because they were 12-0 at that time. If they win, they're in the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in the college football playoff, the way it went, they are going to the Sugar Bowl. And that is a game I was going to. I have a friend of mine at the time that lived 6 blocks away from the Superdome.
Mm-hmm.
I was going. I was spending an irresponsible amount of money if it took it to go. Like, all they had to do was win. And granted, that was not easy because they played Ohio State. And that was just a game where, like, we've seen a lot over the years of the Badgers in the spot like that. Like, they didn't play bad. They just didn't play great.
Right.
And that was just one that, just like, man, obviously now, college playoff has expanded. It's a little bit different, but still, like, when it was that kind of exclusive 14 party, and you made it.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, man, because they could have gotten totally annihilated by Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I could have said, hey, the Badgers are in the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
They were a semifinalist. They were one of the 4 best teams in the country that year.
Yep. Nope. That's a good one.
That stuck with me for a bit.
My number 4, I'm going with the 2018 Brewers. Specifically that Game 7 against the Dodgers in that one.
Chris Taylor, you jerk.
I keep thinking it was Cody Bellinger or whatever, but it's funny because now, I think it's on Brewers.com, Adam McCulvey, it all started with Chris Taylor's catch.
Yeah.
Like this recent trend, all started with Chris Taylor's catch.
That's a very good way to put it. But yeah, I remember exactly where I was for that. I was driving back from covering a regional final volleyball game. Bloomer played, I think, Rice Lake. Bloomer lost. Did Bloomer lose? Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. I forget. But I was coming back and I was listening to that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was coming off the exit to Chippewa when that happened. Because I think first Euchre said it thought I got down.
Right.
And then he's just like, "Oh no, he caught it." I'm just like, "Oh." We just all know when something happens in sports, and maybe it wasn't like a Pete Alonso 3-run home run, but you're just like, "Oh no!" Like that.
It sucked the energy in the air.
It did.
Not only in the stadium, but like watching it.
Because listening to it, I just felt like, "Oh no."
Yeah, like watching. I'm like, "Oh!" You just felt like it sucked everything out of there. And I think a lot of people. I had the mindset too, because that was the year the Red Sox were just. Say what you want now afterwards, but they were like, okay, nobody's going to beat the Red Sox in the World Series. But it was just that close to get there, too. And that series, you had Brandon Woodruff hitting a home run off Kershaw.
That was such a back-and-forth series. They came back, like that Game 6 where they came out so hot. Like, it just felt like, who knows? Yeah, maybe they go and they just get annihilated by that Red Sox team.
Right.
But you know what? They would have that shot. And as we talked about before, we want something besides 1982.
Right.
If it never happens for us and we were old and gray, and well, I'm already gray, but
ditto. So,
but in 30 years we could have said, hey, yeah, but that 2018 team.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because you were out game 163 that year too.
I was. Yeah, we made the trip. Actually, a couple of my friends I was at the game with last night. We're a part of the group that went to Chicago.
Yeah, and I remember watching that one here actually in our newsroom at the end there too. So, yeah, Game 7, 2018. I go under just because it's that Chris Taylor catch that's just like, oh crap. Sort of thing. So,
my number 5, I will put last night's game on there. I mean, I will, just because even though it's a little bit lower stakes than a lot of these other ones on this list, but being there live and to have such a gut punch with it, to go from the highest of highs of Jake Bowers and Sal Frelick hitting home runs, allowing 2 hits going into the 9th. You got the guy you want in that spot, and it just gets away. It just, as we talked about earlier, it's just what we've had for the last, going back to the Chris Taylor catch.
Yeah. Yep.
It was the same thing, just in a little bit different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I thought about putting it in my top 5. It probably would be an honorable mention for me. And obviously, I think that one would hit you more than it would me because you were there.
Yeah, correct. And that's why. Like, it had...
That's why the 07 championship hits me more than probably a lot of people, because I was there.
And it hits you maybe more than the 14 one, even though that one is a little bit more spectacular in how it happened.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So my 5th one, I'm going Super Bowl 32. I was in 6th grade? 6th grade. Yeah. And, I mean, you win the previous year, and you have, you at that point, you're hearing everything on TV, these huge favorites, But I just remember my reaction after the last pass. That was an incomplete from Favre to Chimera over the middle. I backhanded the arm of the couch, and it was a wooden thing, and I thought I broke my wrist because I was so upset as a 6th grader. Like, I remember shutting up, and I was just upset. I was mad. So I remember that vividly, and I was heartbroken after. As a 6th grader, I was heartbroken. Packers lost the Super Bowl thinking, hey, we're going to win 2 in a row. So... yeah, probably Super Bowl 32. I do have I don't know if I'd say honorable mentions. One would be an honorable mention. But I want to throw these 2 out there just because of the moment they happened. And we would talk about heartbreaks. An instant heartbreak. I will say the Final Four against Kentucky when Bader hit that shot. Yeah. Because that was when Kentucky and UConn played for the national championship, 7-8. I really believe Wisconsin would have won the national championship. They would have beat UConn that year. Kevin Ollie's UConn, not Dan Hurley's UConn.
Yeah.
But that 3 is like, because when it happens, it's like that's a gut punch.
Yeah.
Right there. Especially when it's like 3 feet behind the arc.
Yep.
The other one, this one I don't know if I put an honorable mention, but it sucked. Badgers and the Gators at Madison Square Garden when Zach Showalter hit that one, and then the floater in the lane. It's like
when the full length of the court.
Yeah.
Yep. That was a Sweet 16 2017.
Yeah. Yep.
It's the last time the Badgers been in the Sweet 16?
Mm-hmm. I'm just like, really? Because how many times... We've all done those floaters, and they always go off the back of the rim because you put too much on it, and it's just like, it's those last-minute, last-second game-winning shots. If you're on the opposite end of that, it's like, oh, crap.
Yep.
So,
I've got 4 honorable mentions, but I'll be quick on them. 3 of them are Vikings ones.
Oh, okay.
I put 98 on there, but the only reason 98 is not higher is because I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I fully understood the scope of it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it sucked, but I don't think I understood like the historical nature of like the 98 Vikings and yada yada yada.
Yep.
I put the 03 Nathan Poole game because that might have been actually the maddest I've ever been after a Brewer game or after a Vikings game. Like I was an angry kid, angry kid. And then the 2015 Blair Walsh game.
Oh yeah,
where
the ice cold out, TCF.
Which I was thinking about going to that game. I'm glad I didn't.
Luke did.
Yeah, I did. Yes, he did. But I just remember I was watching with a friend of mine, and when he missed the kick, and even before he's like, "So what do you think?" I go, and I swear to you, I said, "I think he's too close." I would have had more faith in him making that from 50, even in that weather.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the fridge. I grabbed a bottle of blackberry brandy. I just took a big pull. I sat back down. And I got a text from my sister, she's not a Packer fan, she's not a Viking fan, but she wanted the Vikings to win.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, that really sucks. I just text her back. I go, when you're a Vikings fan, these things happen.
Because didn't that game, too, kind of very similar to that 14 NFC Championship game? Russell hits that deep throw or whatever.
He got, like, there was a play
running around.
There was a play he should have got sacked.
Yeah.
That
he
was
just throws it up.
The Vikings were winning most of the game. There was a play where he should have got sacked. He did a Russell Wilson thing where he kept the play alive and made a big throw down the field that kind of set the go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
The Vikings move into range.
Yep, it's almost like the 2-point conversion that Russell threw against the Packers. Like it's like somebody else catch it.
Yeah,
you had all that time.
Yep. And then the other one I put on there was Brewers 2018. That one I only have as an honorable mention because after that game I wasn't as despondent, even though it was Game 7 compared to Game 6 in 2011. Because my first thinking was like they can do that. They can get back here.
Yeah, that's true.
And I guess they haven't got to that level, but they have been more consistently a contender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to get, because you're right. 2011 there was a finality to it.
And they didn't get back there for 7 years. So.
And I think why I didn't have 2011 on my top 5 was because it was Game 6, and it was.
Right.
I remember going into Game 6, I'm like, it's Sean Markham, though. And Sean Markham you could tell he had nothing left.
He was like gas.
And I'm like, oh, crap. I wasn't feeling good about it. But I will say, after that Game 5 against the Diamondbacks, we were in the parking lot afterwards just celebrating. And I remember looking at my phone, I'm like, Philly lost. We have home field. We got this.
Yep. I remember thinking the same thing, like, oh, the Cardinals, yes.
Yep. Because that's when they just won how many in a row just to get in.
Right.
Yeah, momentum carried them. So, oh yeah, there's quite a few. Trying to think of somebody had mentioned Bucks Raptors one. That one.
That's a good sneaky one.
Yeah, I'm assuming the Game 7.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yep. I can't put my Magic in there from '95 because it was just.
They got obliterated.
Yeah.
I thought about putting in maybe one of the Rose Bowls for the Badgers, either the one they lost to TCU or the one to Oregon. Mm-hmm. That was a shootout. I mean, they've lost many of them. Heck, I was even at the one where they lost Oregon in 2020, and that didn't make the list. That wasn't necessarily heartbreaking, but
What about the Kirk Cousins Hail Mary when he was with Michigan State?
That wouldn't be a bad. I don't know if that would ever make out, but that one. Yeah. I remember being in the office for that, and that sucked.
Yeah.
And then they did it again. the Ohio State did it again a few weeks later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In hindsight, that might have even hurt more than the actual Rose Bowl because, at that point, the Badgers were a legit national title contender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what kept them from it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I guess
we wallowed in our own self-pity enough.
Yeah. And that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Again, brought to you by our good friends from Toyson Ford and Hy-Vee. And don't forget to check out the Swag Cave, the residence branding company Swag Cave. That link is in the podcast description. For Brandon Berg, I'm Dan Casper, and we will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.